What's up, guys, and welcome to the 56th Xamarin Android tutorial. So this video is going to be a continuation of the previous video in which we took a look at how to add a fragment to a frame layout. So this video is going to be just basically how to use that transaction in the support fragment manager to add multiple fragments to the same frame layout and to get some cool animations with it. Okay, so this video is going to be focusing on how to do that and how to add some multiple fragments, and then the next video we're going to work on the animation part. So as just to refresh, we have some animations that we work on, and then we have the fragments that come in, and then we have a fragment 4 that comes in. This will be in the next couple videos how to do this, but let's focus first on how to actually put in multiple fragments into the same frame layout. So as you remember, we do have one fragment, and we are putting it into the frame layout inside of the main AXML file. Okay, so here's our frame layout there. Now, what we need to do now is we need to actually create 3 more fragments. Okay, so I've done the liberty of actually creating the 2 and 3 fragments of the AXML file, which if you want to take a look at, it's basically the same thing, just with a different color background and then a separate fragment 2 text instead of 1. And then same thing with the fragment 3, same thing, just different background color, and then fragment 3 here. All right. So let's go ahead and create our fragments though. Let's go in our CS classes. And then now if we come into here, we're going to create fragment 2. Okay. And then we want to make sure that we actually inherit from the fragment from the support library. All right, because we are using the support fragment manager. Let's go ahead and copy that. And then let's go ahead and make another fragment that's going to hold fragment 3, the layout file. New file, fragment. We will call it fragment 21. Nah, I'm just kidding. Fragment 3. And paste that over there. All right, so fragment 2 is going to inflate, you guessed it, layout fragment 2. So let's go ahead and create a view, and we'll use the inflator to call upon its inflate method. And then we'll call upon the layout file, which is called fragment 2. And we are going to use its containers as parents properties, and we do not want to attach it to it. And then of course we just want to return the view. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this, and let's do the exact same thing for 3. All we need to change is the layout file name. So those are our 3 fragments and our CS classes as well. Now what we want to do is we want to actually give us a way to choose what fragment to bring up, okay? And that's right here in the menu bar. Notice that when we have our overflow, we can choose. So just an easy way to actually give ourselves a way to test this. Let's go ahead and change our menu file. So our menu file, I'm just going to go ahead and paste that over. Since it's rather trivial, all we're going to need to do is take away the refresh button, since we really weren't using it. And then we can add in 3 strings, which are show as and never, to force it to go into the overflow menu. All right. So we'll save that, and then we'll come back into our main activity. As you guys probably know, the on options item selected is what's called when the action or any kind of button in the action bar is actually clicked, which will just have a couple more cases in a switch case that will cover it. So let's come into here, and then what we'll do is we'll do case resource ID action fragment. Let's rebuild it. We might have to do a rebuild after this. That's no problem. So action fragment 1. And then we're going to want to do action fragment 2 is going to be the other one that's called. And then of course the last one is going to be 3. And we'll do a return true on each of them to let them know that it has been handled. A little space here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a rebuild to make sure that these errors go away. Okay, so we have that action refresh here in the case, but we got rid of this icon, so we really don't need it anymore. And looks like we're all good to go. So what we're going to need to do, guys, is we're going to need a way to actually switch out between fragments, okay? So let's go ahead and create a method that's going to take care of that for us. And what we'll do is we'll call it private, and we'll make it private, and we'll make it void, and we'll do show fragment. And this is actually going to take a parameter, which we'll go ahead and make the type right now. It's going to take in the support, we'll call it support fragment. We'll name it fragment. So support fragment is going to be a type that we're just going to actually give an alias to. So we'll do using, and then we'll do equals Android support for. So this is just to make sure that we're using the correct fragment, not the one from the normal library, but the one from the v4 app namespace. And remember that this is due because we're directly inheriting from this same namespace. All right, so we want to make sure that we're passing in the same type. So now that we have that, we can come into back into our function, show fragment, and we can start doing some stuff there, okay? So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make a transaction. This is where a lot of this stuff's going to happen. So we're going to want to make a transaction to where actually we can manipulate these fragments. So we'll do support fragment manager, and we'll do begin transaction. And then just so we don't forget in the end, let's go ahead and actually do a commit right here. And then any of our code will be in between, but it's easy to forget that. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right. So what we need to do is we need 3 fragments. All right. We already have 1, but we're going to need a variable. We're actually going to need to make them variables so that we can have more control on where we assign them to. But the first thing we're going to need is that we're going to actually need a variable to keep track of the current fragment that's showing. So we'll call it current fragment. And this fragment is going to equal whatever current fragment is actually being shown. And then we'll have fragment 1. This is where we'll actually implement these. Fragment 2. And then finally fragment 3. Change it to 1. And then here, really doesn't matter too much as long as it's in the on create. We'll do m fragment 1 equals new. Fix that little typo there. And then m fragment 2 equals new fragment 2. And then it equals new fragment 3. All right, so here we're actually going to replace this one with this. And then we're going to want to make the current fragment fragment 1, since it's the one that's initially being shown. Now, here's an important thing, guys, is if we do add, and then we want to add the fragment to the same container, right? And we want to add fragment 2, and then we'll give it the tag of fragment 2. And then we'll want to add the third fragment to the same fragment container, which is just a frame layout. And here's where we add it, 3. So if you guys haven't watched the previous video, make sure to do that now, because we did it. I went over and explained a lot about what this is doing here in the last video. So notice that we did it in this order, fragment 1, 2, and 3. Now what's going to happen is it's going to overlay it. Fragment 3 is going to be the first thing showing, because remember how a frame layout works is the last thing has the highest Z index. So since this is added last, it's going to actually overlay on top of the other fragments, and this is going to be showing first, okay? So we'll go ahead and demonstrate that right now. All right, so as you can see now that fragment 3 is the first fragment that's showing because it's the last fragment that we added. So it's kind of like a stack. We want to actually add the last first. So what we could do is we can actually just make sure that that happens right here. And like that. So now fragment 1 will be on top, and therefore it'll be the first to show. The last thing we want to do here is we actually want to explicitly hide it as soon as we add it, because technically they're all like, if we don't call add, or I'm sorry, hide, they are all showing. And that's because we're going to need to hide it. And the only reason why fragment 3 in that case was showing initially is because it was on top. But technically they are all showing. So according to the framework, they are shown unless we actually explicitly call hide, okay? So we want to actually explicitly hide 3 and 2 and only show 1, all right? So that being said, let's come back into our show fragment function. And what we're going to want to do is a few more things here. We're going to want to, first of all, we're going to want to set the, or I'm sorry, to hide the current, the current fragment. So we'll use trans and we'll do hide. So whatever the current fragment is, the user wants to switch fragments. So we obviously want to hide the current fragment. And then therefore we want to actually show the fragment that's desired to be shown, that the one that's passed in, right? Now here's what we actually is very important as well. We want to actually add to backstack. So what this does is it adds the transaction to the backstack. And what it means by that is when we actually do a transaction we call commit, that's actually a full transaction. So we add it to the backstack saying that, okay, when the user hits back, we want the last transaction to be popped and implemented again. So everything will basically be popped back, and the user can retain the same fragment that they were in before, much like how it works with an activity where you hit back, it'll go back to the previous activity. This allows it to go back to the previous fragment. All right. And then the next thing and the last thing we want to do here for now is we want to actually set the current fragment to the fragment that was just shown. So therefore updating this. All right, so the next thing we want to do now is we're going to want to actually call it here in the appropriate and send it the appropriate fragment. So what we'll want to do is we'll do show fragment, and here of course we want to send it fragment1. And let's go ahead and copy and paste that here and here. And then we just want to call fragment2 in this case, and then fragment3 in this case. All right. All right, so fragment1 is initially showing, and then notice that we have our drop down from here over here, and if we click fragment2, fragment2 comes up, fragment3 will come up, and then if we hit back, it works as expected. But notice when we come back, when we hit fragment2, nothing happens, and that's a problem obviously. So what's going on? And it's only after we go back. Well, what's happening is the way that we actually keep track of our fragment kind of fails on us because of the fact that when we hit back, this fragment, like when we hit a fragment, the overflow menu, when we hit the overflow menu here at the top, what happens is it calls and it updates the current fragment. However, when we hit back, the framework, Android takes care of the rest for us, so the current fragment never gets updated. Therefore, the current fragment, when we go back, say, from fragment 2 to fragment 1, well, the current fragment is still 2. So what it tries to do is it tries to hide 2, even though it's already hidden, and it's trying to actually show 2 as well, or 1, or 2, whatever you're calling, but it's already kind of, we're hiding it here. So it's a little confused because of the fact that we're not updating the current fragment. So what do we do? Well, to me, the easiest fix is to actually override the on back pressed. So what we can do is actually override when the user actually presses the back button. What we can do is, just to make sure we're doing it right, we'll do on back. So what we can do is we can actually check to see if there's anything on the transaction stack, and if there is, and only if there is, call the pop it, and then of course call the pop explicitly, and then get that from the current fragment, which is going to be the one that's popped. So the one that's popped is the one that's going to, therefore it's the one that is going to be the current fragment. So what we could do is we could do manager dot backstack entry count. Okay, so entry count, and if that's greater than 0, which means this basically means there's something on the stack if it's greater than 0. Otherwise, it's not greater than 0. Just simply go ahead and call the base method, okay? Now, what do we want to do here? Well, the first thing we want to do is we want to actually explicitly, since we're going to be the ones that are now controlling the back button for the fragments, we'll want to pop the stack. So we could do fragment manager pop back stack. So we can explicitly call this. But how do we get the current fragment? Well, the current fragment can actually be handled, and we can actually keep track of it manually by implementing a stack, because that's all that it is, really, a stack. And if you're not familiar with a stack, what a stack is basically in a gist is it works last in first out. And a good way to kind of picture it is like a stack of plates. So a stack and a stack of plates, where when you stack a plate and then you stack a second plate and a third plate and so on, what's the first one that comes off? The one on the top. Usually you don't grab a stack of plates and you don't grab a plate from the bottom or in the middle, because they'll break. So the easiest way to grab a stack of plates is from the top. So you put the top in last, but yet you pull it off first. So that's kind of what the stack is. The last in is the first out. All right. So kind of a kind of a good way for me to remember when I was learning about that. Now, when you come over here, what we're going to want to do is when we actually show the fragment, we're going to want to actually explicitly now add it to our stack. And the way we can do that is if we come in here and we do m stack fragment, and we'll do push. So we'll push it onto the stack, and we'll push on the current fragment. Notice we'll do it before we actually change it. Okay, so this current fragment is what was actually coming on before, and then now it's this one. So we want to actually push on the one that's about to be hidden, or has already been hidden. All right, now when we come over here now, what we can do is we can do m current fragment equals m stack fragment pop. And notice that what it does is it actually returns a type of support fragment. So it pops it and then it returns it, which we then update the current fragment with. Therefore, when it comes back into here, the current fragment will be still updated now, and then now it won't actually mess anything up. So there you have it. Let's go ahead and run this and make sure that it's working the way we expect it to. So not really too much work for what we for what we accomplished. And actually, before we run this, what we do want to do, just so we don't get a null reference because I never actually instantiate it, we're going to want to actually instantiate the stack, which we do get a warning up there. That's good. So new stack, and then it's going to hold the support fragment class. All right. So that should work just fine. All right, pull up the emulator. So now what we should expect to see is now when we actually go through and we actually, add the fragments, but then when we go back, the current fragment should still be updated because we went back and then we popped it. It should now update just fine because the current fragment is up to date. All right, so there you have it. Now, there's a main common way to do it is to basically just add and then show and hide fragments, like how we did in the show fragment method down here. However, there is another way. There's another way to do it, and what we can do is we can do replace. And what we do is we don't actually add multiple fragments. We just keep replacing a fragment into the frame layout. The only problem with that is when we do that, we actually destroy the view. Okay, so here it's still there, but it's just not showing. Whereas in a replace, it's totally gone. Therefore, the view has to be recreated again, and any data that we may have had will be lost unless we actually save it. So there are some better goods and bads to this, but this is easier. However, this is all still in memory when we actually keep showing and overlaying the fragments. So we have 5 fragments in one frame layout. We're of course using more memory than we are when we use the replace. All right. So the replace I'm going to show in the next few videos. We'll do the replace method of how to actually switch fragments using replace. But there is pros to that, and then of course there is cons, or there is pros and cons to doing it this way. It's kind of whatever meets your application needs is which one you need to do. So I do want to show you both, since you probably will use both in different situations. All right. So the next video though, we're going to actually concentrate on how to actually add those slick animations And it's actually pretty simple. And once we do that, and then we'll move on to actually how to bring up the fragment 4 and how to pull it up and manipulate the frame layout that it's in. All right. Thanks for watching, guys.